Okay. He's live now. All good? Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming today. Jarrod Bleijie, State Member for Kawana. Look, it's great to be in the electorate of Caloundra with local member McArdle, but we also have the fantastic team Sunshine Coast here. We've got Fiona Simpson from Maroochydore, Andrew Powell, the candidate and member for Glasshouse, but also three fantastic local candidates that I look forward to serving in government. And that, of course, is Brent Mickelberg, the candidate for Buderim, Marty Hunt, the candidate for Nicklin, and of course Purdie, the candidate for the new seat of Ninderry. So thank you everyone for joining us, and of course Fiona Simpson, the member for Maroochydore. So thank you everyone for coming down here today. This is a really important announcement. The LNP for a long time has always looked at the issues in terms of law and order, and Labor are soft on crime. We know that. You've got to have the policies in place to ensure that people are being punished for the crimes they're committing. Now today we're talking about ICE. It's a scourge on our community. People are dying every week because of this scourge on our community and the ICE and meth. And on the Sunshine Coast, we're particularly hurting. We're seeing young families broken apart because of the drugs. We're seeing easy accessibility. We're seeing it's becoming cheaper, and more people, unfortunately, are getting onto ICE. Not only when they get onto it, they're then being addicted to it. And this has got to stop. So we need the offences and punishments in place to deter the manufacturers and also the traffickers, but we've also now got to make sure those who are on ICE get off ICE. And that's what we're announcing today as part of the LNP plan to tackle the ICE scourge across Queensland. We're announcing across Queensland over $50 million to set up rehabilitation centres in Cairns, Toowoomba, the Hervey Bay region, the Hervey Bay region, and of course Caloundra. So we're going to have 4 rehabilitation centres across Queensland, but as part of this $51 million package, we're going to educate people. We're going to invest money in educating people. We're going to get the community's input on this. We're going to give $1 million to Crime Stoppers to ensure that people can dob in a dealer, because we will go after the dealers and the manufacturers. But we've also got to make sure is the people that are on ICE, we get them off ICE. That's why I'm pleased to announce today with our colleagues and the member for Caloundra that an LNP government will establish an ICE rehabilitation centre in Caloundra. And this will service the entire Sunshine Coast to ensure that those people, particularly young people that are addicted to ICE, can have the opportunity to get off ICE. If they're going into jail and serving time in jail for the crime they've committed by taking and having possession of ICE, that's one thing. But it's likely they're coming out of prison and doing exactly the same thing, going back to ICE. So what we've got to do, those that want the help will get the help under an LNP plan. Now compare this to Labor's plan. It's all talk. Anastasia Palaszczuk's Do Nothing government has done nothing on ICE other than talk about it a lot. They've had a summit. They're going to have more summits. They're talking about it. They're not investing money into it. They're not investing in real outcomes like the rehabilitation centres. So this is a real positive plan to ensure that we can reduce the ICE scourge in our community. If we reduce people taking ICE and who are addicted to ICE, we will reduce crime, we will reduce domestic violence, and we will reduce these antisocial behaviours that we're seeing with people that are currently on ICE. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hand over to, of course, 2 of our fabulous candidates, Purdie and Marty Hunt, current serving police officers. They deal with this stuff every day of the week. Marty in the PCYC and Dan as a detective. So I thought it might be good to get their input into it. And then would like to hear from McArdle, the local member for Caloundra. So Dan, over to you.
Thanks, Jarrod. As Jarrod said, I'm a detective sergeant on the Sunshine Coast here in the Child Protection Investigation Unit. I've previously worked at the drug squad across the state. ICE is a scourge on our society, and our local police here work tirelessly to get on top of that issue and protect people in our community who might be subject or involved in the ICE trade. We work tirelessly to dismantle and disrupt the trafficking networks, and extra legislation that's been announced today to help us take action in relation to that is very encouraging. Also too, the Rehabilitation Centre, police are working tirelessly to put these people before the courts and dismantle the networks, but the rehabilitation at the end of that and the training involved at the start is a multi-pronged approach to tackle it from a number of different issues.
Dan, can I just ask,
Yep.
How bad is the problem here on the Sunshine Coast during the police force? How does it manifest itself?
Look, comparatively on the Sunshine Coast, we are lucky here compared to other areas of the regional Queensland where youth unemployment is over 50%. ICE is an issue here, and police work tirelessly to stay on top of it, and we do everything we can to try and combat it. But we need extra funding, extra resources, extra legislation, and also training and rehabilitation goes a long way as well.
How's it affecting families?
Well, look, I deal with that every day. I've unfortunately seen young kids taken away from parents who are on ice, and I've also seen parents suffering with their kids, teenage kids or older kids who are on ice. It is affecting our families directly, and we do what we can to stop that from a law enforcement perspective. But now it's always been hard to get rehabilitation beds locally, so when those people put up their hand to say that they want help and they need help, it's been hard to try and get them the help. That's why this funding in relation to local rehabilitation is fantastic. These people, when they put their hand up and they want help, we can direct them to that help. Well, look, there's some private services that people have to pay for, and that's another burden on families to try and come up with the money to help the family member, combat the issue. And there are other non-government and charity organisations that do as much as they can, but there has been a shortfall in professional rehabilitation funding and access and beds for those people who genuinely want to turn their life around and get off ice. Look, as I said, comparatively on the Sunshine Coast, it's a great place to work and it's a great place to live. And there are some other areas of Queensland that are more adversely affected by this. But it is an issue. It is an issue. We all know that. We're dealing with it every day, but comparatively it could be worse. And that goes a long way to what our local police are doing to combat it. We do work hard to stay on top of it. It is a cancer in our society that spreads, and we need to not only disrupt the networks and put people before the court, but we need to give them opportunities to have rehabilitation to stop that revolving door of in and out of that drug cycle for families and all of us across the coast.
Marty, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, so as the officer in charge of the Police Citizens Youth Club locally, I'm dealing with young people every day who are caught up by addiction. It's really tough for them to get the services they need, and community organisations locally, really great organisations, but they are struggling with dealing with this issue, and this announcement today is a real boost for the young people who want to get off this addiction and get their lives back on track.
How important is it when young people have made that decision that they want to get off ice, that they need help, that there is that acknowledgement that they can find these places easily?
That's right, and that's why this is such a good announcement, because we need specialist services. We really do. The community organisations are struggling to provide those specialist services. To put the focus directly onto that, to provide the help they need to get their lives back on track, is really what's exciting about this particular proposal. We'll trade a mark on that one, or Jarrod?
Sorry, what was the question, Heather? Well, this is a priority for the LNP. We'll get the 15 days out of the way, win the election, and that's the opportunity for the Sunshine Coast community here. We will then go out to tender for these centres in the 4 places right around the Wide Bay region, the Cairns region, Caloundra and Toowoomba. We would expect this in the first budget of an LNP government, and in stark contrast to Labor, who have had 3 years, haven't done anything on it. We'll get on with the job and we'll make sure these centres get built straight away. Well, I'll answer that, and then we'll go to Mark as local member for this area for the drug ice issue. Extraordinary, the Labor candidate for Kawana yesterday said the Sunshine Coast rail duplication should be the lowest priority rail infrastructure issue in Australia. I was gobsmacked by it. The rail duplication should be the first priority for any member or candidate, and I can tell the Sunshine Coast community it is for the Liberal National Party. The only way we're going to get the rail duplication on the Sunshine Coast is to have the team elected on the Sunshine Coast and an LNP government put. We've already announced with our Shadow Minister Andrew Powell, who's here today, $300 million for the rail duplication. But extraordinary comments from the Labor candidate saying the Sunshine Coast rail duplication is not a priority for him, and that he would rather see a Brisbane Cross River rail line for Jackie Trad rather than sticking up for the Sunshine Coast. I think the issue is he's running in the wrong seat. He really is more Brisbane central, and he should look at running for the Labor Party in Brisbane, because he obviously doesn't have the Sunshine Coast in mind.
Jarrod, just to be fair, yesterday you said that the submarine cable into the Sunshine Coast wasn't a particularly big priority for electors, and you were elected as well. What are your thoughts on the submarine cable and how important that may or may not be going forward?
Well, look, the LNP have supported with a letter from the opposition leader to the mayor the submission or the idea of the submarine cable. The Prime Minister's government has also given an endorsement. They've given a loan for the submarine cable. But what the LNP have announced is $300 million for rail duplication, $15 million to ease the congestion and fix Caloundra's longest car park, as Mark McArdle refers to it, and the community does, on Caloundra Road, Nicklin Way. We announced a couple of days ago $5 million to ease the congestion on Parklands Boulevard. The Liberal National Party has announced hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in the first 10 days of the campaign, and we've still got 2 weeks to go, so watch this space. But look, with respect to the undersea cable, the LNP have supported it, but as I understand it, the full business case hasn't been conducted, it's not finalised, so we'll wait till we get those details. But I made the point yesterday on the ABC that my constituents in Kawana would much rather see $15 million spent immediately on easing congestion so they can get to and from work quicker and they can get their kids to and from school more safely rather than an underground submarine cable to America. Mark?
Thanks, Jared, and also my colleagues as well. Look, this is an excellent announcement. It'll go to tender, 18-19 financial year, between 20 and 30 beds available on the Sunshine Coast in the Caloundra region for rehab. Understand that human beings matter, and there are many parents and grandparents out there at the moment with children or grandchildren hooked on either legal or illegal drugs, and their life is being destroyed. There are many grandparents out there now looking after grandchildren because the parents are either hooked on a drug or in some way involved with the drug scene. This gives these people, the people who we live next to in some cases, a chance to get back on track with their life. This is an opportunity for the compassion of the Sunshine Coast to come together and understand that these centres are critical if we're going to draw people back from the dark side where they are at the moment into what I would call a mainstream society of a fruitful life, re-engage with their family and maybe their children as well, and also to develop the Sunshine Coast as part of the process of living on this great area. The other point I'd like to make quite clearly is this, is that there may be questions in relation to security. Can I say this? If you're hooked into drugs, you're doing assaults, break and enters and robberies. These are people who are volunteering now to get clean. And I'd rather have them in a centre getting treated than breaking into the houses of people who live on the Sunshine Coast, assaulting people or breaking and robbing convenience stores, petrol stations and the like. This is a chance for us to show that we are going to be compassionate, but also at the same time put in place the laws that we need to get those who are engaged in the trafficking, production, etc. of drugs and put them behind bars for a long period of time.
Mark, what do you think about being able to get to people before they start getting these addictions? Does anybody have any thoughts about does any of these programs cover the education about what these drugs are doing, or have we looked into why people are getting onto these drugs in the first place?
There is no doubt prevention is better than cure. And with drugs, that is clearly the case. There are a myriad of courses, of programs, not just here on the Sunshine Coast, but right across the state, that educate people in schools about the danger of drugs, the danger of legal drugs and illegal drugs. So the process is, yes, let's start by looking at what the outcome is going to be and address that. But I agree entirely. We need to focus also on prevention, because preventing it from taking place in the first place doesn't lead to the disastrous consequences that occur on a long-term life of drug, crime and the like.
Charles, we're also part of this package is $2 million in a statewide education campaign for people addicted or on ice. So new money, $2 million. And also we'll also ensure that in terms of the criminal element, criminal organised gangs like bikie gangs peddle these drugs everywhere. We'll ensure under our laws that bikie clubhouses are not operating again on the Sunshine Coast like they were years ago.
Mark, why is it taking so long for us to see something like this? Obviously there's a real need for it in Caloundra. Why is it happening?
Well, let's be clear here, the location is in Caloundra, the region is across the whole of the Sunshine Coast. Look, the LNP has always had a very strong commitment, first of all, to law and order under Jarrod Bleijie as Attorney General, but also we also understand that compassion needs to be shown to those young men and not so young men and women as well, who are hooked on not just illegal drugs, but legal drugs as well. There have been ongoing private organisations involved in the process, but we feel now that we can provide a better service or a service that complements current arrangements to get more people off those substances and back into the community. But I think importantly too, back with their families, because the family is the single most important unit in our society. And grandparents looking after grandchildren, and they come to me on a regular basis and say that I can't contact my daughter or my son because they're on drugs. I have my grandchildren who I love dearly, but I'm finding it hard. If we can reunite that family, it means the children work better with the parents with the grandparents, and the unit comes together again.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.